Hello, everyone, and welcome to Lawyers with Game. If you're interested in learning more about legal issues in the world of esports and video games, you're in the right place. My name is Darius Gambino, and I am first and foremost a lifelong gamer. I've played on just about every home system from the original Atari to the Sega Dreamcast to now the PlayStation 5. I'm an intellectual property attorney with over 20 years of experience advising clients on issues related to patents, trademarks, and copyrights. I'm with the firm of Saul Ewing, Arnstein, and Lair in Philadelphia, and you can find me on Twitter as @PhillyIP. With me today is my colleague, Mark Simpson. Mark and I are both members of the video gaming and esports group at Saul Ewing. Mark, maybe you can say a few words about your practice.
Sure. Thanks, Darius. It's fun to be here. I'm happy to be invited to be a part of this. And like you, I'm an attorney at Saul Ewing, Arnstein, and Lair, who has worked in patent law for longer than I want to share. My hair is gray enough to show you how long it is. In terms of gaming, my first experiences with gaming were really back in the 80s with the Atari 2600. And then through the years, I've sort of drawn away from it, but Darius is helping me get back into it. He's become my gaming advisor. He's going to help me with my next system that I buy. Because I've been advising clients so long in intellectual property, I have actually witnessed or been part of the evolution of software protection. So, software protection did not used to be available, or it was very difficult to get. And over the years, court decisions and other things like that have changed the way it's been done. And I've been there from the beginning, so I've sort of learned from it.
Thanks, Mark. And we are really excited today to have Anthony Gaud from EG3 Esports with us. Anthony is an Emmy Award-winning creative director and media entrepreneur. He has worked with companies like Marvel and Disney on creative projects. He was a toy designer for Kenner and Hasbro. And he helped Comcast launch their video-on-demand children's network, Kabillion. These days, Anthony is all about esports. He at G3, they run tournaments, and he's in the process right now of getting ready to launch an online casino where you can play video games against other people for real money. Anthony also has a Star Wars podcast, and he's been to Skywalker Ranch multiple times. I am jealous, Anthony.
Yes.
Thank you for being here. And did I miss anything?
Well, I used to write television shows for a while, so I wrote children's television shows. I was the first art director for the first ever computer-generated television show. So we did that over at a company called Mainframe in Vancouver. Generally, my whole career involves entertainment of some sort, one or the other, but mostly tech-related. So a lot of the stuff even I did at Hasbro, I did Transformers and I did Batman, but we also did a lot of the stuff at Hasbro that was interactive. So we also did a lot of the when we did for a time, Hasbro was about to lose the Star Wars license to Mattel. So I was put in charge of a team that was part of it was to get it back from Mattel. So we put together all these interactive media presentations, and our spaceships do this and they unfold, and we had animations doing this, a whole big pitch. So it's always been tech related. And our latest project is, with G3, it's all about technology and the merging of all those things that people like me and myself have come to enjoy and grow up in. I can say one thing: I beat you on my history in video games. I played TRS-80 games before the 2600 games came out. So my dad used to be a programmer from NYU, so he used to make his own games back in '75. So that, I think, takes you maybe a year ahead of the 2600.
Yeah,
Yep.
Definitely. You beat me on that one. And
I don't know
we
if
will
I'm
put
proud
a
of that,
link.
but
I was going to say, we'll put a link to Anthony's Star Wars podcast in the description if anyone's interested in checking that out as well. It's really great. If you like these videos, please like and subscribe to them. If you want any more information on myself or Mark, you can visit Saul Ewing's website at www.saul.com, and that will also be in the description. If you're interested in a little gaming, I am Eagles Fan 71 on the PlayStation Network. Come find me anytime I'm not working. I'm interested in playing just about any game out there. And finally, please keep in mind that this series is intended to be a high-level discussion of legal issues in the world of video games. It is not actual legal advice. If you need actual legal advice, please call Mark or I or email us, and our information will be in the description. Today we're going to be talking about mobile games. Now, I know a lot of people don't like to draw a distinction between mobile games and platform games, but that's exactly what we're going to do today. By mobile, I'm talking about things like Clash of Clans, Words with Friends, but I'm also talking about things that cross over from platforms to mobile, like PUBG and Fortnite. So mobile has really just taken off in the last couple of years. Southeast Asia is now a mobile-first gaming community, meaning their gamers prefer to play on mobile over platform, which I find to be amazing. And India is definitely headed that direction right now, if they're not already. And part of the reason for that, I think, is that for the most part, many people in the world have some type of a cell phone and a data plan. And it makes it really easy for people to have access to video games. You don't have to spend $500 or more on a PlayStation 5 or make a huge investment into software. It's all there on your phone for the most part, and a lot of it is free. So, for instance, in 2019 in Southeast Asia, their total gaming revenues were estimated at about $4 million. About $3 million of that was due to mobile. Now, Mark, I want to turn this to you because you've represented King.com, the publisher of one of the biggest mobile games on the planet, Candy Crush, and you've helped them get a lot of patents related to that game. Can you speak a little bit about your experience there?
Sure, sure. So I have a very active European practice, and as a result of that, I'm often retained by European tech companies, European attorneys, to manage their IP portfolios. And in the case of King, a really good friend of mine and an attorney in London, Peter Langley, he introduced me to them because they were looking to build their patent portfolio. Particularly because of my experience and success in navigating the difficulties that can arise when attempting to patent software, especially in Europe, by the way. In Europe, it was much more difficult than it was in the US. They were behind us in terms of allowing it even. So software is largely what's being protected in gaming patents. There are hardware elements to it that get involved as well, but most of it is some software implementation. And without getting into the legal details, protecting software via patent has been tricky because the Supreme Court of the United States, the appellate courts, especially the Court of Appeals for the Federal Circuit, which is where patent appeals are heard, provide decisions, and then we just have to learn to follow them. And I have learned over the years how to navigate them well, and that has helped me help my clients and help me in my job.
About how many patents have you filed for King.com on Candy Crush, and how many have you obtained for them over the years?
So last time I looked, I think we filed we can talk about this because it's public record, about 250 applications. I feel like I'm talking about game levels. We were up to 250. We filed more than 250 patent applications, and I think we've issued about 150 of them so far. They're a fun group to work with. They're very creative people, and they are constantly just coming up with new ideas. I mean, that's one of the things you have to do in any gaming environment is keep coming up with fresh ideas, which is why they keep upgrading them all the time.
Yeah. And Anthony, you have a ton of experience as a creative director and a designer when it comes to mobile games. First, tell us a little bit about that experience, and second, maybe any comments you have on patent issues that you've run up against in your experience.
So we've started the various companies that we've had. We started developing applications, mobile apps for Asia first, right? So in South Korea, for example, I agree with everything you said. The appetite for mobile gaming is massive. It's mobile gaming and PC mostly in Asia, right? There's a lot of console stuff or PlayStation stuff in Japan along with Nintendo Switch, but in South Korea it's almost exclusively mobile and PC. And When we went to Disney Interactive, we started developing, both those mobile and PC platforms for Asia. We were in charge of the Asia division. So we made games for Star Wars and made games for Marvel and Kingdom Hearts and translated them over for the Asian markets. So we had to take sort of Western sensibilities and combine them with Eastern sensibilities and come up with some sort of hybrid, which is a lot of fun and it's a lot of learning. So you have to learn, for example, for Marvel, you have to learn about all the characters. What's the essence of Iron Man? What's the essence of what are the histories of Captain America? And then you have to try to translate that to something relatable in Asia. Because Captain America is an American conceit. You have to figure out what's going to make him desirable. Why would people want to play Captain America if you live in Korea or China or Japan? So that was a big part of the job. The other part of the job was working with Square Enix on developing Kingdom Hearts games. They're one of the biggest companies in Asia, one of the most renowned companies in console space. Some of the biggest games of all time have come out of that studio, and that was a real treat. And there's a lot of learning process there too. So you do see some conflict between East and West from time to time. I'm already a sort of highly energetic person anyway, so I tend to get into more conflicts than other people. But the creative conflicts are always something that are part of the process, right? And when it comes to working with, coming up with new ideas, it's always that fight between what do I want to do? What am I allowed to do? What does the corporation want me to do? What do the demographics expect? Right? So part of the issue that could arise, we didn't run into it too much in 2015 or 2016. We didn't run into patent issues that often. But I think that from a developer point of view, from a creative point of view, we're always looking for blue sky. I want to do the best game of all time. It's everybody's goal, and then it's up to the producers and the game designers to sort of take that big scope and limit it down and figure out what's the core of the gameplay, what's going to appeal to people, what fits in this, what business does this make sense? I'm going after this space, or I'm going after these kind of customers, or gamers that we made a couple of games with a company called Half Brick, which you may know made Fruit Ninja, right?
Yeah.
So are we going to use the Fruit Ninja mechanics to create a Star Wars game? Or are we going to go after the Fruit Ninja demographics? And what are the Fruit Ninja demographics? So you're always kind of going back and forth before you decide what a game is on what are the business aspects, how much money do you think we can make, who are we targeting? And then when you get into the creative, it's a whole nother process that takes often months and presentations internally, and then you want to find out what is the license that I'm going. Am I making a Marvel game or a Star Wars game or a Kingdom Hearts game, or am I making a Mickey Mouse game? Because we also worked on Epic Mickey. So there's a lot of stuff that you have to take into account, and I think that what's happening is going to be a sort of butting of the heads between the creative and the legal, right? So it may be difficult for a creative blue ocean when we don't know what the limitations are ahead of time. So a lot of these companies, publishers, are going to have really the boundaries drawn a little bit more aggressively at the beginning of a game design process. So you're going to make a game that fits into this box. And creatives don't often like that, but it also often helps. Because if you've ever been to a restaurant that has too many menu items and you don't know what to order because it's just too much, sometimes it's easier just to have that box defined, and I'm going to operate within that box,
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And I think you raised a point that I was going to address with Mark, which is there was a bit of a sea change in patent law when it came to software in 2014 with the Supreme Court decision in Alice versus CLS Bank, which really scaled back the types of software that are protectable by patent. And I think before that, you saw maybe a lot of ridiculous patents out there. But now it's like everything in patent law, Mark, it's swinging the opposite way, right? The pendulum is swinging the other way. And now we're in a mode after 2014 where it's really difficult to get software patents. But if you do get them, they're somewhat battle tested and ready for enforcement, right?
Right. Yeah. So back in the 90s, when we were getting software patents back then, it really was the Wild West. You could people would patent their business plans from their master's degree programs. They would patent almost anything that had a process involved with it. And so that's what, eventually came to the decision. I think you were referring to the Alice decision of the Supreme Court, and also there were some interpretations of that by the Federal Circuit that have really changed. We can't really focus on the abstract idea anymore, which is what we were doing way back then. But one of the things that's always interesting to me about this whole patent process and the process of the courts getting involved is you have to remember that the Supreme Court, for example, there are a bunch of very, very smart people who deal with so many different types of issues that they can't be expected to know the ins and outs and the technicalities of intellectual property law, yet they're being asked to decide these cases. And whenever a court case comes out from the Supreme Court that involves IP law, immediately my email screen lights up with people complaining about how terrible a decision is or how great a decision it is. That they don't, everybody has their opinions. And while I have my opinions as well, I try to focus really on whatever guidance is being given by these court decisions. They're just telling us rules. And so people can complain about it, or they can take notice of what the courts are saying and say, okay, how does this help me help my client? What can I do to get them the patent, first of all, through the patent office? And second of all, make sure that once it issues and it's out there in the world, it's enforceable, that somebody can use it and it won't get struck down by a court or by some other administrative proceeding where it's being attacked. So the courts have made a big impact, but they always have and they always will. And really what you do as a practitioner is you just try to read what they're saying and try to apply what they're saying. And in the end, it really makes my job easier. And our job's easier to do that. So this is the kind of thing we are grappling with when the courts have these decisions. But like I said, I look at them as a roadmap, and they're helpful. They help us get where we want to get.
Right. So Anthony, switching gears a little bit, tell us about G3 Esports. I mean, you have one of your subdivisions is the CF1 Collegiate conference where you're putting on collegiate esports tournaments. And you also have this online casino element that we'll refer to as the quarter platform here today. Tell us a little bit about all the different things that G3 is doing right now.
Sure. So G3 started 2017, 2018 as a company that facilitated esports for Atlantic City. So we did a public-private partnership with the CRDA, which is the local the governor's group here in the city that kind of disperses casino money for the better uses for the region. So we put on a couple of events here in Atlantic City, actually 3 of them in 2019 before COVID hit. They were pretty big. We did a collegiate conference with the Collegiate Star League. So we had a grand finals. We had, I forget how many schools, but it was over 50. We had an esports summit here where we had all the esports leaders from North America and through Europe come here and just kind of see what the city was like for hosting esports. So we put on a couple of more collegiate events for them to be able to understand this is esports at a high level. We had Rutgers play Stockton University. We had UGC and Microsoft, an event here where we had Halo Championships, which are great. That was fantastic. That was a 3-day event. We had overnights. We brought a lot of money to the city with the people staying for multiple days, and they would go to the restaurants and go to the bars after the events. And it was almost like a college atmosphere. It was a lot of fun to see that kind of camaraderie, players from all over the country coming together to play Halo against each other with almost no incidents. It's friendly competition. So we decided that we would, he's laughing because I said almost. We decided that we were going to sort of take this to the next level, as they say, and create our own collegiate conference. And collegiate esports is something that's really becoming quite established by now in 2021. When we started thinking of how to put it together in 2018, 2019, it was something that has already been done by the Collegiate Star League, which is a company out of Philadelphia, which I'm very close with. They're good friends of mine. Their CEO, Rob Johnson, is a great person. I plan to have drinks with them next week. But what we wanted to do was a little different. So they have a wider audience where they take teams that are varsity and some of sort of like teams that are put together by students that are not part of the official school, not endorsed by the official school. We wanted to just have varsity teams that are, scholarship teams to try to recreate the NCAA. So we wanted to be, have a governing structure. So we hired Kieran Ensor as our president. We worked with a company called Mainline Esports, a fantastic firm out of Texas that had broadcasts on a platform. And after our first year, which actually just ended very recently, UC Irvine won the spring tournament. I was just told today that we had a extremely high favorability. Almost every school is coming back for the fall. We have over 60 schools now. We have all the big schools, not all the big schools, but a lot of the big schools, Penn State, Indiana, Rutgers, Oregon, University of Texas, you name it. They're all in there. And it's a thrill to see an idea come from the difficulty of trying to establish it, because we did try to partner with a whole bunch of different groups to get it going. And there was always difficulties in just finding out who talks a lot and who does a lot and who will actually do the work. So there's a lot of esports conferences that happen in esports, and we don't attend a lot of those because I only want to talk to people who actually get something done. And there's a lot of people that are just talking. And we have no interest in that. We have no time for that. So when we put it together, we found the best people. We had our premier year. It went well. We're looking forward to the fall and expanding. The conference one is going to have some plans around that. Then when it comes to the other aspect of the business, which is trying to facilitate what is the next level of competition, for us, it was gambling, right? So, if you go back to the late 1800s when baseball was being established, baseball actually hit a roadblock when it came to trying to expand the sport. It was expensive to have your team take a train and go to another city to play, and they weren't really sure who was going to pay for it and what were the economics of it. And gambling turned that around. It really gave motivation to a lot of teams for people to watch the sport, right? So the statistics of gambling and of all the players, and I think really odds became a big thing. That's why baseball has statistics like batting averages that really wouldn't have been there if it wasn't for gambling. So for us, the next natural phase of what esports needs, and I'm talking about the esports industry itself, there's a lot of problems right now endemic to the sport. Sponsorships are tough. Events are expensive. Viewership is huge for a lot of the big events in Europe, but not so much in the States. And it's not something that happens regularly. These events are very expensive to put on. So how do you normalize this stuff? How do you standardize it? How do you make it so that people can rely on these things in the way that Conference One is a reliable, hey, every Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, we have events. How do we do it for the overall sports scene? So we decided that getting into the esports wagering space was the way to go. So there was no esports wagering space. So we helped establish what the foundations are with New Jersey Assembly Bill A637, working with Assemblyman Caputo to come to an agreement as to what the law should say, working with the New Jersey Economic Development Authority, working with the New Jersey Division of Gaming Enforcement, getting their take. What do they want? What do they want from esports wagering? What do we have to have? What do we want to avoid? That's where I think the industry is going. And I think once we're successful at doing what we're doing with esports wagering, you'll see a lot more reliability. You'll see a lot more attention being given to the space. And I know it is a burgeoning space. It's a growing space. But one of the big problems is how do people make money? Well, we facilitated the first esports wagering event back in September of 2020 during COVID. We had an event called the Allied Esports. It's an Allied Esports event that was hosted in Europe. And the Allied Esports event, they're good friends of ours that are based in Las Vegas, the big pyramid building that they have their logo on. That event had 1.7 million viewers with no marketing, and that's outrageous. I mean, that's tremendous viewership, unique viewers. So that's the kind of level of attention that you'll get when wagering is established, right? And people watch the sport just like back in the late 1800s. I want to watch the sport because I'm going to wager on it. So, it gives you a reason to watch, and it gives you a fun to keep track of the stats that normally you wouldn't really be that worried about, right? But now I want to know, okay, well, when this player plays that player or that team plays this team, the odds that this player will win are this, and the likelihood that this player will get a headshot in this situation. I mean, it gets into very, very deep levels of minutia, but that's exactly what people like about sports, right? The statistical part of it. So we are entering that space, and I think this is actually the first official time that we've mentioned that. We've spoken for with the governor's office before, but we've never actually announced that we're getting into the esports wagering space. So here we go.
I appreciate that you did that on our program. One of the things that I think is really cool about the Quarter platform, I mean, you talked about a big piece of it, which is wagering on, let's say a Valorant tournament or a League of Legends tournament, wagering on a specific player or a specific team. And this would all be through a mobile app that you're designing right now. But one of the coolest things that I thought was, individual head-to-head games against other players that are also on mobile, kind of going back to where we started this whole discussion, and placing bets on who's going to win those games and winning real money, because it will be connected to an online casino, or it will be its own online casino. Can you just give a little color to that, how the kind of one-on-one games will operate on the platform?
I can't give too many details because some of the details are still being worked out. But I will say this, right? The allure of being able to put your skill to use to make money is something that naturally comes to gamers. I think I'm good at this thing, so I can put in money and see how much I can make. Or I think that person's good at this, and I really believe in that person's skill, so I want to wager on them entering into that tournament. Or a team. I think my team is better than all the other teams, so let's put it to the test. And I think that's one of the things that is kind of missing right now. Now, it is developing. You'll see platforms like Skills and GSN and Game Taco building these sort of skill-based websites that allow you, and mobile websites to allow you to kind of wager-ish on competitions. We're different. We're a real wagering platform. We're not limited in the amount of wagers that we can take. And I think it's going to provide a lot of thrill. So if you can imagine combining a sort of Dave & Buster's and a casino together, that's exactly what we're going to do. Now, the details will come out over time, and they'll be worked out over time. So much I want to say, but I can't say. But I will say I think this is a mature space now. One of the things that we have to be cognizant of is that the perception has always been that this is a space for kids. It's not a space for kids. And I think, Darius and Mark, you both agree that the average gamer is well into their 30s. Some mobile gamers are well into their 40s, depending on the game, right? King will probably tell you that. Some of the gamers are, heavy spenders are in their 40s, female gamers. So the idea that gaming is for kids is not true. So part of our lobbying efforts and part of our efforts with the platform and PR efforts are going to be around, hey, this is the space right now. We're all adults. We can enter into friendly wagering and stakes safely if somebody offers it. So a lot of what we're going to do is a couple of things. We're going to make sure that the site is safe. So we have a lot of KYC, know your customer. We're going to be able to tell you, know where you are, make sure that your kids aren't on the system, make sure that someone who's really good at something doesn't try to get in on a lower level game to beat up on people. There's a lot of things that we're taking care of besides the content that's surrounding the platform. And I think that's what's exciting for us is we're creating a safe, regulated space that you're just going to be able to have fun in and bring your friends, invite your friends, play with or against them. It's going to be something really cool.
Yeah, it's really exciting. I can't wait to see it and to play it. Mark, one of the things I wanted to talk to you about is some recent news this week about getting back to the patent angle for a minute. The Japanese publisher GREE, who makes a lot of mobile games for the Asian market, secured a $92 million jury verdict against Supercell OY, who makes Clash of Clans. And they asserted several patents, but they all generally relate to the concept of city building games, where you can take different elements and build a castle or build a city over time. How do you think a judgment like that will affect kind of the future of patent litigation in the mobile gaming space?
Well, I mean, obviously it's a large verdict, and I mean, I think it's going to just create more and more of this sort of competition. I'll call it, but it's legal competition over who has rights to what, who's doing what. I mean, software in particular has a history of being sort of something you do in your garage, and everybody's free to do it, and freeware and all of that stuff. And there's a truth to that. But there's also this pushback, and there's often a pushback actually from some software developers about the idea of patenting software to begin with. It's sort of this free and open market some people perceive, but others, as is demonstrated by these cases, see it differently. So I think a company, it's particularly larger companies or companies that are developing, are going to see this idea of protecting your games through the IP, through patenting in particular, is it can be a very successful way of not just controlling the market. I mean, that is part of what you're trying to do, but you're building a business and you're spending a lot of money and time and effort in putting this together. And you've got employees you're paying, you want to pay fair wages to. And the patent process is a way of protecting the investment that you are putting into this. And so I think you're just going to see more and more emphasis on trying to focus on what is protectable and protecting it, so that people see games, they see games come out and they drop in front of them like they've been there all along, but they don't necessarily understand what went into all of that in the years sometimes that it takes to put them together. And the number of people that are working from all over the world. You have creative people, you have technical, you have engineers working on it, you have musicians and graphic artists, and all of these people are working together to get to this point where a game drops and everybody looks at it and says, oh, great, the game's here. It just came out yesterday. But a lot went into that. And so I just think something like this will give people more incentive to, if they're not doing it now, looking into making sure they protect their games and their investments through the patent process. So I think you're going to see more of this. That's my opinion. You're the litigator. You may feel differently about that.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think you're going to see a little bit more of it. There's always a backlash, right? When there's too much patent litigation in a space, and like you said, software in the video game space, there's almost this concept where you want to share things, and so I think there will be some litigation, and there may be some backlash, and it'll go back and forth like these things do. But it's certainly extremely interesting to see a verdict of that amount. In the mobile space.
So I have very strong views on the idea of patenting game processes and game systems. It's a tough discussion, right? And what I'm going to say, it's probably going to, you guys will both disagree with me, or you both agree with me, but I'm looking at it from the creative side, right? And I am also, an entrepreneur. I created companies, I created game companies that I sold off. It is a very difficult concept for me to wrap my head around the idea of patenting game systems, and I'll tell you why. Especially coming out of the Asian market. The Asian market is essentially synonymous for games that are similar to other games that came before them. So games like Puzzle and Dragons are like games that came before them, with slightly tweaked mechanics. Some of them are the same, but just better content or better IP or better execution or better, bigger budgets. So you worry very heavily that innovation will be snuffed out, because sometimes the best concept may not be the best execution of that concept, right? So I go back to Puzzle and Dragons, which is not a game that's here in the States, but let me put it in another name, Mario Kart. Mario Kart there's a game out of a company called Nexon that I used to work at. Mario Kart is very similar to Kart Riders. Kart Riders is almost a national sport in South Korea. Kart Riders is a very popular game, but essentially it's almost the same exact game. If we had patented one, it makes the other. I forget which one came first, but I'm guessing it was Mario Kart, but I don't really know. But I'm guessing it was Mario Kart. Then this other thing is missing. This very important cultural, event is, where people literally leave school to go to 7-Eleven to buy Kart Rider cards. It doesn't exist. If Nintendo had litigated and said, well, look, you can't copy these systems. And then you get into the question of, well, how do you define a system? Because some things are commonplace, like the idea of using secondary, economies where you have coins that represent in-game purchases. The company that I started innovated that. One of our founders was a guy called the father of microtransactions. We never took out a patent on it, and if we had, it would have destroyed the entire system. So the question is, if you're creative, how do you work within that system? Because if you don't have the budget, or even if you do have the budget, if you don't have a chief legal counsel, how do you even know what your limitations are until someone sues you or someone says that you violated a patent? So that's one of the issues. The other one is, yes, going around these patents is a skill, but sometimes it creates a user experience that we don't want to create for the user, right? So when we create games, we lose a lot of players based on inefficient and bad user experiences. Too many buttons, or too long a story, or whatever it is at the beginning. So ultimately, gaming has become sort of like TV. What is the craft here? So television shows have an opening. Sometimes they have a monologue if it's a live show. They have a 3-act sort of structure with a conclusion. Is that patentable under the same structure? Right? I'm just being facetious. I know it's not, but I'm saying if you had to avoid that, it becomes really problematic. So for a game like Clash of Clans or city building games, you can go into 30 different games. What defines a city? Is The Sims a city? Because there are different buildings. How big is a town before it becomes a city? So you get into all these it just makes it more difficult for innovation in the space. Now, I agree that there are a lot of games that are blatantly ripping off other games. I'm not going to mention any, but there are a lot of them. And there's a fine balance to me, or there needs to be a balance between games that just, I'm going to do that game and change the art, which happens all of the time. Or, that's a nice, they have some really good ideas for city building, but I'm going to do this. And by the way, that city building game was predicated on an idea created by, Firaxis 20 years ago in the state, So how do you got to go back sometimes for common elements in these things. It just makes game development really, really hard.
Yeah, in that way, the way you're describing it, it's a lot like the music industry, right? Exactly. Musicians build on what came before them and their influences, and games are creative in that same way. And I don't think you want patents to stifle that creativity, and that's what it comes down to. So, anyway, this has been an awesome discussion, but that's all the time that we have for today. If you have any questions about any of the legal issues that we've raised during this discussion, please drop them into the comments and we'll do our best to answer them without providing any real legal advice, of course. Big thank you to Anthony God from G3 Esports for being with us today. Lots of really interesting information. Can't wait for the quarter platform to come out. And thank you to Mark Simpson, my colleague. Until next time, I'm Darius. This is Mark, and we are Lawyers with Game. We'll see you next time.